So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. So this is one of the initiatives of our FADA knowledge series, wherein we have a webinar regularly conducted on mostly a Saturday. Those who might be aware, we've had earlier webinars for the Central Motor Vehicle Act, for GST, consumer protection, data protection, and a lot of new laws that are coming. So India is changing quickly, as we all know. And there are things that affect us as auto dealers. And at FADA, we wish to impart knowledge, share knowledge, latest developments, etc., with all of you. So we can be better prepared and knowledgeable about how to handle the changes coming in. Green initiatives by the government, laws changing to enable more compliances are some of the things that are happening very quickly. The government is also encouraging all these changes. And of course, it is for benefit of all of us and the future generations. So as a responsible association and responsible dealer owners, responsible businesses, all of us have to be aware what is happening and comply to the best possible extent that we can. But we can do that only if we know what is the change, what are things that are actually coming in force. How to treat our effluents that come out from our businesses, how to make sure that we are compliant to the pollution norms are some of the things that are extremely critical. Oil is a subject that there is not too much clarity about. There is a lot of gray areas. So today we thought that we would be having a webinar to give and impart more knowledge on this. What is the correct way of sustainable handling of the used oil that comes out of all our vehicles? It is quite a quantity that comes out. There are different methods of dealing with it, like we all know. But what is the best way to do it? What is a sustainable way to do it? And for that, today we have Rosefield Energy Tech, who are joining us and sharing their insights into this. We have Ms. Kasturi Bhave, who is a co-founder, and Mr. Kedar Gore, who is a partner at Rosefield Energy Tech. And I'll hand it over to them so we can start the session. I'm sure it will be very interesting and a lot of our doubts would be cleared. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Seth, for the nice introduction and the opportunity that FADA has given to Rosefield to put up this very important topic of used oil. I'll quickly share the screen. So before we get into the main topic, a quick introduction about Rosefield. So Rosefield is a startup committed to sustainability, and we are in a very unique position around circular economy of used oil because we have network with the re-refiners, the oil producers, the oil consumers. So, and we have also been doing a lot of work in used oil, whereby we are actually gone into the ground and tried to understand the ground realities of how things in used oil industry work and what is the best possible that we can do to bring it to the mainstream. That is very important for the environment as well as the Indian economy. This is our team. So Rosefield has been founded by Shailendra Gokhale, who is a veteran in the lubricants industry. He has spent more than 25 years in the industry and was part of the global leadership team in BP Castrol. I've been part of Rosefield since its inception in 2014. I have also worked for more than 2 years now in the circular economy industry. I've spoken at various conferences and webinars around this topic. Our CEO, Bhaskaran Nagarajan, is another veteran from the industry, having 30 plus years. Kedar Gore, who is a partner at Rosefield, again has worked on various assignments on circular economy and has spent more than 15 years in the lubricant industry. So why are we now talking about used oil? What is circular economy? To put that across, I'd like to hand over to Kedar.
Yes, yes, thanks, Mr. Amar, and thanks, Kasturi. So I think the title of this webinar is very apt, sustainable handling of used oil. And you see this word sustainability being thrown around a lot nowadays. So why are we focusing on sustainability, right? Why are we even bothered about, terms like carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, net zero emissions? I think the reason is all around for us to see. It is climate change, which is leading to a huge global warming crisis, right? I mean, it's not just global warming because just recently the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, he has warned that global warming has now ended and we have entered an era of global boiling. Okay, so which is, I think doesn't augur well for, us. And as I mentioned, you can see the effects all around you. I mean, you, we, Kasturi, everyone here can see the effects of global warming. This 1.5 degrees, change in the average global temperature is causing havoc for us year after year. Glaciers are melting. People in Delhi are feeling the effects of Yamuna flooding. People here in Maharashtra have seen landslides, and people, are just, villages are getting washed away. You can see what's happening in Himachal, Uttarakhand, those areas. So, I mean, then it's all about nature coming back and hitting us very hard. So, frankly, I think we don't need to save the planet anymore. We need to save ourselves, and we have very little time to do that. Right? I mean, the clock is ticking very very fast in terms of reversing the effects of climate change. But to overcome this acute crisis, I think of climate change, the COP26, which is the conference of parties of 26 nations, they agreed to reduce the net carbon emissions. By net carbon emissions, we mean whatever carbon we emit into the atmosphere because of our, human activities, minus the carbon that we, kind of extract back and send it into, consume that back. That's essentially what is net carbon emissions. So, India, for example, is the world's third largest emitter in terms of carbon emissions. So we have made a commitment that we'll be net zero by 2070. We will increase non-fossil fuel energy capacity to 500 gigawatts, and you can see the action in terms of green hydrogen, in terms of renewable energy, in terms of electric vehicles probably becoming popular, all of those things, right? If you see even today, railways, I think Indian Railways has reached 85 to 86% of electrification. So all the diesel engines, all the coal engines have long been lost from the use. So the circular economy is one of the ways to achieve sustainability, right? And by circular economy, we mean three key things: reduce, reuse, and recycle, right? In a normal linear economy system, we take from the earth, we make something, and after its use, we just dispose or we just throw it off. We don't know where it lands in a landfill or it gets burnt in the atmosphere or goes into the oceans. We don't know. But in the circular economy, we behave in a more responsible manner by taking back whatever we have consumed, right? So, for example, we have to reduce the amount of energy that we are using. Shared mobility, you use an Ola, Uber, you use other modes of transport, you use maybe a railway. That's shared mobility, right? We use long life lubricants. We have BS6 emissions today. They all talk about reduction in emissions, right? Reuse means, for example, you buy a used car instead of a new car. Okay, or use an Airbnb, for example. For us, what is most important is recycling, which means reprocessing or recycling of waste to use raw materials into making new products than using virgin raw materials, right? So that's what we essentially talk about circular economy, reduce, reuse, and recycle. Yeah? Which is, again, as I said, one of the ways to ensure sustainability for the environment. So next slide, Kasturi. Yeah. So this is something which the government of India identified for circular economy sectors. And why these 11 sectors? Because simply because these are the 11 sectors or 11 areas where maximum waste is generated. And this waste goes into landfills or goes into the oceans or is just burnt or just is lying there in trash bins, for it to in the hope that it will decay, but it doesn't, right? So areas like municipal solid liquid waste, electronic waste, scrap metal, batteries, solar panels, all of them are essentially waste streams which are coming under different areas of regulation and legislation, which we'll talk about, in a while. So circular economy, in a way, to target 624 billion and 44% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. By greenhouse gas emissions, you mean carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, basically all those gases which are a part of which are generated as a part of human activity and which go and get trapped in the Earth's atmosphere and increase the temperature. Right? Those are basically greenhouse gases. Yeah. Next slide, please.
Yes. So, what is this oil that we are all talking of, and where it comes from? Right. To give you a quick reference, the oil that we are talking of is the finished lubricant, or the gear oils, engine oils, UTTO, transmission oil, hydraulic oil, greases, all these products that go into the vehicle. That is the oil we are talking of. So this finished lubricant is made up of two main elements. One is base oil and another is additives, out of which base oil consists of almost 80 to 90% of the product. Right? Base oil generally comes from petroleum or crude oil. So distilled crude oil, one of the cuts you get as base oil. When these finished lubricants are then used in the vehicle, after some time, these lubricants gather a lot of soot or carbon or metal particles in it, making it a black oil. So on the right hand side, as you can see, the fresh oil is a translucent golden color, while the used oil, with all the impurities in it, has become more of a black colored, thicker oil. Right? So whenever your workshops must be servicing the vehicles, right? Many of the vehicles come for oil change, right? So the oil that gets drained out of the vehicle, engine oil, gear oil, UTTO, all this can be considered as unused oil. With the circular economy concept that Kedar talked about, how can we get circularity in oil? We can start with base oil right at the top. So like I mentioned, base oil goes into the finished lubricants or the lubricating oil. These lubricating oils are then used in the automobile industry and various other industries. When the automobiles are serviced, this oil, the used oil, is now drained out of the vehicles. We call that as a used lubricating oil, or the black oil that you saw in the earlier picture. This used oil that is now being drained from various workshops, various service stations, needs to be collected rightfully and then sent it for re-refining. What is re-refining? Re-refining is a process, a technical process that is put up on the used oil, whereby all the impurities, water, sediments are removed, and then making it as good as a fresh base oil. Right? So re-refining is the process that helps convert the used oil to a base oil, which we now call as re-refined base oil. This re-refined base oil is now ready to go again as a part of the lubricating oil. One very unique part of used oil or re-refined base oil is that it can be re-refined multiple times. There are cases, or there are many other elements that can only be refined or recycled once or twice, right? But used oil is unique in that sense that even if a lubricating oil consisting of a re-refined oil is drained out, it can again be processed to make a re-refined base oil once again. So this is an endless cycle or a loop that we can put into. Some of the benefits of why this re-refined oil is important. One is that if this used oil is simply thrown out into the water, some of the workshops we have seen, right, don't know what to do with the oil, and they just drain out that oil. Many of the industries do that, right? Not being aware of what to be done, they just simply dispose of this oil. When you dispose of this oil in water, 1 liter of used oil has a capacity to contaminate 1 million liters of fresh oil. To give a reference of 1 million liters, 1 million liters of water is equivalent to 1 year supply of water for 50 people. As we have seen the scarcity that we face for fresh water, it is very important that we conserve fresh water and reduce any contamination that is caused to fresh water. So disposing of used oil environment safely in the right means is very important so that it does not pollute the water as well as soil. In many cases, we have seen that the oil gets just disposed of on ground, or the soil in on ground soaks it up, again affecting the agriculture. Another benefit of used oil being processed as re-refined is that you need just 100 liters of used oil to produce 70 liters of re-refined base oil. Against a normal virgin base oil, if you have to produce 70 liters, you are required to distill 7,000 liters of crude oil. So in other terms, if you are sending 100 liters of used oil from your workshops to re-refining, you are as good as saving 7,000 liters of crude oil from being extracted. Right? So that is the huge quantity or the impact that can have when you send your used oil for re-refining. Another important point is energy conservation. The energy required to produce or manufacture re-refined base oil is just 1/3 the energy that is required to produce virgin base oil. What is the main hurdle or main challenge that we see in used oil, or what are the things that some of the workshops do or don't do? You can just think for yourself and the workshops, or make a note of it, what your workshops are doing or not doing. What we have seen is that many of the workshops do not check if the used oil collector is authorized. Many of the workshops are selling out used oil to collectors, but there is no track to see whether the collector is a registered collector, where that collector is sending the used oil. As an environmentally responsible citizen, the used oil collector should be sent out to re-refining, because some of the other applications that I'll showcase in a few minutes have hazardous impact. So whenever used oil is being sold, you should check that the collector is authorized and that he should be sending it to an authorized re-refiner. Many of the workshops do not segregate different types of oil. As we have seen in the earlier slides, gear oils, engine oils, transmission oils, UTTO. So different kinds of oils get drained down during servicing. But it is also very important to segregate that oil. I'll showcase shortly how you can do that. As a part of compliance, as a part of current compliance, you can say, you are required to get a Form 10, a document showing that you have sold the oil to a registered dealer. So it is always important that you demand Form 10 from the collector so that you know that you are selling it to an authorized collector. Always store used oil in a safe manner. Used oil is a hazardous waste. So in spillage of used oil can cause a lot of, for example, someone can slip. The metals in this used oil can affect human health. So it is always important to store this used oil in a safe barrel. Ideally, you can mark the barrel saying this barrel contains used oil, right? So you have to handle it with care. Another part is keeping records of used oil. Many of the workshops don't keep records of the used oil, how much used oil was drained, how much used oil was stored. But it is very important for you to keep the record. With the new compliances coming in, as Kedar will take you through shortly, you'll understand why it is now becoming important to keep proper records of the used oil. So how does this used oil impact the environment? From our study, we have seen that only 15% of used oil gets re-refined. So re-refining, which is actually the most preferred way of handling used oil, only 15% of used oil gets re-refined or is sent 15% of used oil gets sent to re-refiners for re-refining. So then what happens to rest of the oil? Almost 30% is used as a furnace oil. By furnace oil, I mean it just gets burned in the furnaces. Some of the other elements, 23% of it gets used as lube counterfeit. Lube counterfeit basically means fake lubricants or very similar looking. So the pack will look very similar to Castrol, let's say, or a Shell brand, but inside it could be not so good quality oil that you see. 30% of it we have seen goes in fuel adulteration. So petrol, diesel, used oil is used to adulterate these fuels. And 2% of it is seen in construction industry for a process called centering, whereby they put the used oil on the wooden planks in the plastering process. And once the plastering is complete, they'll just wash off the wooden planks. So here again, the used oil now gets into the water stream. And like I mentioned earlier, used oil has a possibility of contaminating fresh water. So it shouldn't really be getting into water. What is the effect of lube counterfeit? Again, when a low quality lubricant is put up in the vehicles, one, it causes damage to the engine, damage to the vehicle, and another, it causes lots of pollution. Used oil, like I mentioned, contain lot of sediments, lot of metal, lot of carbon. So when you are putting that in the vehicle, your emissions will increase. Fuel adulteration or furnace oil, again, when you are burning used oil, because of the metal particles in it has the ability to cause various health hazards. So what is happening currently? Why only 15% of used oil is getting re-refined? We have seen that many of the two-wheeler workshops or passenger vehicle workshops, commercial vehicle workshops sell it to an unregistered dealer or unregistered collector, right? Because there's an unregistered collector, there is no proper record of what this collector does with the used oil. So while he'll send some quantity to another person, he'll sell most of the quantity to other applications that we have seen earlier. So there is no really record of where this collector is sending the oil. Right? Similarly, there is a hierarchy. So there is a collector who will collect used oil on smaller scale. He'll then send it to an aggregator, so who will work with multiple collectors, collect that oil. Again, he'll sell it out to for other applications only some part of it he'll send it to re-refine. So that is where only 15% of used oil reaches the recyclers or refiners, and only 15% used oil is re-refined. What can be done? So as workshop owners or as service station owners, what you can do, always sell your used oil to a registered collection agent, or you can directly sell it to a registered recycler, right? But ensuring that the used oil that you are selling reaches the re-refinery and is getting re-refined is the most important aspect of handling used oil. In India, we are seeing some good momentum around used oil. Shell recently launched used oil management services with one of the re-refiners called IFP Petro Products, whereby Shell is going to incentivize or rather help collecting used oil. Indian Oil launched two products, Servo Green Mile and Servo Raftar. So these products are made using re-refined base oil. So apart from regular base oil, these products contain re-refined base oil as well. Hindustan Petroleum HPCL was not far behind. They also launched another product in hydraulic coils called Enclo 68 Green. So these are some of the initiatives that these companies have taken proactively. Of course, with the new regulation coming in that we'll showcase shortly, all the oil companies will now be required to play their part in collecting used oil or ensuring that the used oil reaches the re-refiners. So what has changed? Recent development, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has now come up with a draft EPR, which will now be implemented from 1st April 2024. Uh, Bureau of Indian Standards, BIS, is also developing standards for used oil. And there are a number of government, non-government organizations that are working to promote recycling of used oil, like we have seen in various other waste streams. So what is this EPR? Kedar, would you like to?
Yes. Thank you, Kasturi. I hope I'm audible. There's a lot of rain here. At least I'm able to hear that, but I hope I'm audible and clear. So yes, thank you, Kasturi. Coming to the EPR. So I think this EPR is something which I'm sure some people among you must have heard. So EPR is basically a legislation or government policy, which is now placing a significant responsibility on manufacturers, producers, importers and brand owners of a product. In case of oil, it is basically the producers, of the product, to bring back the end of life cycle products as recycled feedstock or raw materials, right? So as Kasturi mentioned, the end of life cycle product will be brought back, as a recycled product or as a reprocessed product, so that you can use these recycled raw products as raw materials instead of using virgin raw materials, right? So for example, in case of plastic, you don't have to go back and process crude oil. In case of similar in case of oil, you don't have to go back and reprocess crude oil. You can just use the existing product, get it to the right refineries, re-refineries, and get it back in the right quality, depending upon what kind of lubricant or what quality of lubricant, synthetic, semi-synthetic, etc. you want to produce, right? That's basically EPR. So what it essentially is doing is it is a strategy for resource conservation and obviously minimizing the impact of industrial activity on carbon emissions, right? That is the most important aspect of EPR. And EPR is essentially a law. And as Kasturi mentioned, it's kind of MOEFCC is is the government ministry which kind of releases these EPRs, and pushing everybody to achieve environmentally sound management of all the waste streams and ensure circularity is achieved, right? So EPR regulations are placing quantitative targets. One of the targets which Kasturi mentioned briefly. So other sectors also have quantitative targets, and I'll just kind of run you through them briefly, right? So Kasturi, can you go to the next slide? Yes. So why is EPR relevant to dealers? I think EPR before used oil, EPR has already come out in 4 other sectors, which is plastic packaging, tires, and batteries, and e-waste. E-waste, I think, is not so much applicable to you. But as major stakeholders who are dealing in vehicles, I think all of you will play a very critical role in each of these EPRs by providing the facilities for collection and aggregation of this waste, and it's supplied to registered collection agents, recyclers, or re-refiners. So in each of these EPRs that you see here, which fall under the Environment Protection Act of 1986, clearly, the entities who are authorized to collect or to recycle or to aggregate have been mentioned. There is a portal which has already come up for plastic, batteries, and tires. A similar portal is in the works for used oil. So everybody who's now every collector, every collection agent, every recycler, and every producer is going to be registered on this portal, and only those people will be allowed to buy or purchase and trade in this kind of used oil. And the EPR also so I just go ahead, Kasturi. Yeah. So essentially, just to give you a brief overview how an EPR looks, an EPR has 3 typical targets. One is a collection target. So obviously, the most important point in waste is you need to collect the waste, right? So the first thing that the government wants is कि भाई आप जाके collect करो, right? So the first target that they give you is a collection target. Then once you've collected the waste, then you have to ensure that the waste is recycled, right? So that's a recycling target. And at the end is a usage target, which means the usage of the recycled product into the finished product. So if you look at tires, already the recycling target is 35% in the last financial year, which means whatever tires you had sold in 2 years before 22-23, you are supposed to collect 35% of those tires back. These are the targets for the tire companies in a way. And by next year they could be 100%. So आप कोई भी tire, you can't throw it anywhere. It has to come back as as a recycling target. Similarly, in plastic packaging, as an example of category 1 plastic, there are 4 categories of plastic. It's a little complicated, EPR document, but there is a collection target, there is a recycling target, and there's a usage target. So from the year after next, you will see all plastic packaging that comes out, whether it is for oil, whether it is even your plastic bottles that you use for drinking water, or for having cold drinks, or for eating chips. All of it is expected to have 30% as recycled plastic. And I think good point which Kasturi was mentioning was oil is infinitely recyclable, right? So for used oil, once you recycle, you can recycle it 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, unlike some of the other products. Yeah. So that's how the EPR is rolled out, and this is all the non-negotiable targets. And every company, and because it's an online process and managed through buying and selling of EPR certificates, it's an extremely, and at least in plastic and tire, we have seen it's a very robust process that is being implemented. Yeah, so Kasturi, can you go ahead? Yes, coming back to a specific point of oil. So from the next year, the EPR targets for used oil for the producers or the importers, kick in from next year. So they have to ensure that 10% of the base oil or lubrication oil sold in the year 2023, that is 2 years back, from next year, obviously, is getting recycled. And this target kind of goes up by 10% every year to reach 50% in the year 26-27. And then it stabilizes at 60%, okay, from the year 29-30. And one more thing I would like to mention is, while Kasturi mentioned there are multiple uses of end oil, every EPR is very specific about what are the end uses that the EPR that are eligible for an EPR certificate, right? If there is any end use other than that, then there will be a legal penalty, environmental penalty, whatever, for the recycler basically, or for the collector, or for the producer, right? So that is very, very clear in the EPR target. So for example, just to give an example, re-refined base oil is one of the defined end uses for used oil. There is no other use which is defined as a legal end use. For tires, it is reclaimed rubber, crumb rubber, modified bitumen, recovered carbon black, pyrolysis oil, or char. So very specific as to what is environmentally sound management of the waste, right? So it is to that level of granularity which the legislation is now being drafted, right? Next slide, please. Yes, just to give an idea of so this EPR is not India specific. EPR has been a tried and tested method of achieving circularity in various sectors across the world. This is just an example of oil circular economy in other countries. So for example, US, the re-refining percentage is 35%, in EU 67%, in Australia 53%, and 22% elsewhere. So, and what we have mentioned here is some things that kind of exist there. So in India, as you see, we have a collection system in place. I'm sure you guys don't throw the oil anywhere, but you give it to somebody. Okay, but that somebody is not authorized, so it's very informal, unorganized collection system. Whereas in other countries, as you can see, system is very formalized, very organized, and EPRs have been very stringently implemented, right? So, and by technology we mean, just to give you a brief. So the question on segregation has come up, and it will come up later also. So what we really mean is, the kind of used that base oil that you need to make the high performance lubricants that you use nowadays in your vehicles, right? The synthetics and the semi-synthetics, long life lubricants, high performance lubricants, they require higher levels of base oil, higher grades of base oil, the group 2 and group 3 is what we call them. So if we are able to get a segregated oil, then obviously it becomes easier to make a higher quality re-refined base oil than having a mixed oil getting supplied to re-refinery, right? Because then the process becomes a little bit more difficult, more intensive, and obviously the output or the throughput of that process is also less, right? So that's where we kind of focused on segregation as one of the aspects, because you would want to get a better feedstock into the refinery, right? Or a re-refinery in this case. Yes. So yes, I think Kasturi, you can take it over from here.
So as you have seen, of course, government push EPR is one of the reasons why we should be handling the used oil safely or environment safely. But apart from the government push, there are a lot of points that by which circular economy of used oil is very beneficial, not just to us as individuals, but to the country as well. So as dealers in India, I'm sure we'll be able to drive these points and help for a better Indian economy, as well as our own businesses and vehicle usage. One major point, like I had mentioned earlier, 100 liters of used oil are just required to make 70 liters of re-refined base oil against 7,000 liters of crude oil. So by sending used oil for re-refining, by putting it as a part of circular economy, you are conserving precious petroleum reserves. So to that extent, lesser petroleum reserves will need to be extracted. So very important point, when we have heard stories of petroleum reserves getting depleted, so on and so forth. So for smooth functioning or smooth running of the industry, it is important that there are sufficient petroleum reserves, and by simply sending used oil to re-refining, we'll be able to conserve these petroleum reserves. As you know, India has a lot of dependence on oil imports. We are importing crude oil, we are importing base oil. The base oils that are getting used in lubricants, more than 50% of base oils are imported, right? So if we are already using the oil that is present in the economy, we'll have to import lesser base oil, right? So that will reduce the dependency of imports to a certain extent. And by reducing imports, we'll automatically save a lot of precious foreign exchange, right? So foreign exchange that is used to import crude oil or base oil, automatically there will be reduction or savings in foreign exchange as well. By ensuring environmentally safe practices of waste management, you are reducing carbon footprint. Like I mentioned, by ensuring that the used oil does not go into water or soil, the carbon footprint will get reduced, the carbon emissions. By ensuring that the used oil is not burned, the emissions that come out by burning used oil, that will get reduced. So you are reducing a lot of carbon footprint, lot of CO2 gases or greenhouse gases from the environment. And lastly, by ensuring the used oil is sent for re-refining, you will be conserving a lot of energy. Like I had mentioned earlier, re-refining base oil requires only 1/3 the energy required to produce virgin base oil, right? We are seeing a lot of electricity crisis uh, at various times. So it is very important to conserve energy. In India, um, most of the electricity is generated through coal, which again causes a lot of greenhouse gases. So by conserving energy, you will be again helping the environment. So what are some of the important things that as dealerships you'll be playing, or what you can do as dealerships to ensure circular economy? Always sell used oil to authorized entities. How you can do that? Check their authorization on State Pollution Control Board websites or CPCB websites. And like Kedar mentioned, with the implementation of EPR, shortly an EPR portal for used oil will also be launched. So this EPR portal will contain the authorization on the various players, various registered collection agents as well as re-refiners on the website. So always check their authorization. Another thing that you can do is keeping records of used oil transactions. As the EPR gets implemented, all the companies will be monitoring fresh oil sold versus used oil generated. Right? From the studies that we have seen, 100 liters of fresh oil, if it is sold or if it is refilled into the vehicle, 70 liters of used oil should be drained out from the vehicle. Of course, there is some burning that will happen inside the engine, inside the vehicle, but at least 70 liters of used oil should be drained out from the vehicle, and all the oil companies know this, right? So, for them to comply with their EPR targets, they'll be closely monitoring where the fresh oil is going and from where they can get the used oil to meet their collection targets. So, it is important for you to keep a record of the fresh oil that you are selling as well as the used oil that is getting generated or getting sold in the dealership. How you can do that? Again, ask the collector for a Form 10. Right? Form 10 is the legal document, compliance document that is presently in place. Of course, with the EPR coming in from 1st April 2024, we'll see newer forms, newer documentations that will come up. So keep a close eye on the new compliances that will be coming in. As of now, government hasn't launched the documentation; they have just launched the EPR. But again, on the newer documentation getting on the EPR portal. Another thing that you can do is segregate different types of used oil for better re-refining. Like Kedar was mentioning, that segregating used oil is very important from the final product that a re-refiner gets, right? For example, if gear oil is mixed with engine oil, the final output, the efficiency of final output gets reduced, right? So if you are able to segregate different types of oil, say gear oil, within engine oil also synthetic oil versus mineral oil, UTTO, hydraulic. So what you can simply do is store these used oil in different barrels. One thing is that if you store it separately, the re-refiner will be much more happier to collect specific oils because his re-refining efficiency is going to improve. Right? So always segregate oil. Ensure that no water or any other sediments or impurities get into the oil. By this, you'll ensure the quality of the used oil that you are storing and selling, which will again be beneficial for you. Another point you can do is set up collection points. You can either build a collection point or dedicate an area of your dealership for storing and collecting used oil. Uh, you can open this collection point to the public, so anyone who is changing the oil themselves, they can simply come in and drop the used oil in your premises, or you can set up separate collection points whereby all the workshops can come together and collect used oil that they are generating. So these are very simple but important things that as dealerships you can play a role. So as Rosefield, we have been, like I mentioned, working with various companies on used oil. We recently conducted a conference on circular economy in used oil in 11th May, and we were proud to have FADA as one of our partners. Tata Motors, Maruti, Mahindra, various other OEMs were part of this. Various oil companies were part of this. So in India, and with the EPR coming in, we are seeing a lot of initiatives, lot of progress in used oil. These are some of the testimonials that our clients have given. Safety Clean, which is one of the leading re-refiners in the world, and Mahindra one of the leading tractor OEMs. While our formal presentation ends here, we had received a few questions from the dealers. What we have done is we have tried to club these questions based on the categories. I'm sure some of the questions you would have already got answered when you were listening to the webinar.
I'm seeing the chat,
we-
a lot of action there actually.
Right. So some pointers on handling of used oil, how you can environmentally safely handle used oil, or what can be done to reduce spillage, etc. Some of the points, used oil is considered as an hazardous waste, like Kedar mentioned, comes under the hazardous waste management rule. So because used oil is considered as an hazardous waste, it needs to be handled, stored, and disposed of as per hazardous waste management rules. So even before the EPR that will come in effect from 2024, even now with the existing regulation, as generators of used oil, you are required to properly handle, store, and dispose it to the registered or authorized people only. Used oil should not enter any water stream or mix with soil. Like I was mentioning, it will pollute or contaminate the fresh water. Reduce any water or sediments or impurities getting into used oil. So always store used oil in a separate area with closed lids. Do not spill the used oil on floor because that can cause spills, trips, falls. Your workshops can get dirty. So always ensure you store it properly. Again, because this is a hazardous waste, ensure that proper personal care equipments, PPEs, are being used while handling used oil. Simple things, using of gloves while handling used oil. Ensure that the barrel is not leaking, so on and so forth. Preferably install a firefighting system in the area that used oil is stored. One of the major things that I've been reiterating, always sell used oil to an authorized collector or authorized re-refiner only, because that will ensure that used oil gets re-refined and not cause environment damage. Use separate barrels. I'm sure with the multiple types of oil that you are, fresh oil that you are using, you'll have good barrels in the workshops. So designate separate barrels for different types of oils. Gear oil, all used gear oil you can store in one barrel. All mineral oil based engine oils can be stored in one place. Many of these oils come with marked as fully synthetic, right? So fully synthetic engine oils can be stored separately. Coolants need to be stored separately. So all types of used oil by categories like gear oil, engine oil, coolants, UTTO, all these should be stored separately. And barrels are there at your disposal, so you can simply use barrels. There were some questions around re-refining or what can be done with the used oil. So like I've been reiterating, re-refining is the preferred way. So what happens, used oil that is sent to the re-refiner, there, there are various technologies like vacuum distillation, hydro treating, so on and so forth. So this used oil is processed to remove all the impurities. Various cuts like a light diesel oil or some asphalt, etc. Various products are you'll get as byproducts while re-refining, and 70 to 80% of used oil then gets converted as a re-refined base oil. Many of you were asking, whom should I sell to? Right? How do I know that it is a
That's
registered
the most commonly asked question on the chat also. Can you name some of the authorized collectors? Any collectors in Ranchi? Anybody in Shillong? So yeah.
Absolutely. So under the existing hazardous waste management rules also, there is a provision to get registered as authorized players and authorized re-refiners or collection agents. Under the new EPR also, there's a provision that all the re-refiners, all the collection agents need to get registered under the EPR. So where you will find it? in the existing system, the Central Pollution Control Board website or the individual state pollution control board websites put up this list of players. So you can simply go to their website, go to a state, say, let's say Maharashtra State Pollution Control Board website, go to their website, and under hazardous waste management, you will get a list of used oil refiners, right? So from there, you can easily identify which is the nearest player, which is the nearest refiner.
Yes.
Because there was a specific question on Tamil Nadu, we have put up a link for Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board website, so you can simply get the used oil, waste oil
What we will
recyclers.
also do, Kasturi, is once the EPR used oil portal is up and running, right? I think
Correct.
everything will be moving there eventually. So we will share that portal link whenever it is ready with FADA, and they can possibly publish it, because then that is where you need to find out your collector or your recycler or refiner.
Absolutely.
If you want to look up for plastics, it's still there. I mean, that portal is still available. Even tires, batteries is available right now. Used oil will be coming up very shortly.
There were questions on used oil pricing, tracing of prices. One point I really like that, the perception that used oil is considered as scrap. It is not really scrap, as you have seen from the presentation, but it is in fact a national resource. So handle used oil with care. Ensure that you are not contaminating the used oil, and always send it to a refiner. On the question of used oil prices tracking, unfortunately, presently there is no online portal from where you can track used oil prices. But I'm sure with the EPR portal coming in, there must be some provision. Yeah, so these were some of the questions that we have received earlier. Hope most of your questions got resolved. Do let us know. I can see some questions in the chat.
Yeah. So I think I'll just take them. I think most of the questions were around. There was a question around benefits of segregation of used oil, which I believe Kasturi we've answered. I think it helps you to get a better feedstock into the refinery, and yes, I mean better, hopefully better pricing as well, right? If you give a separate synthetic oil. Synthetic waste oil and a separate mineral-based waste oil rather to the refiner or the collector. Yes, a lot of questions about where do I find authorized collectors, refiners. I think we've answered that. Somebody wanted a sample form 10. We could, I think, email it separately. Standard percentage of new oil to used oil. We answered that. I think 70% is our collection, estimated collection percentage, right? So if you're putting in, let's say, 10 liters of oil in the sump, roughly 7 liters should be collected back, right? Other questions, somebody here wants to recycle their own used oil. Any take on that?
Of course, if you are able to put up a re-refinery, a strong technology re-refinery, that is the need of the hour in India.
Yes. No, I think I'll tell you.
But it is not as simple as,
yes.
putting up a ETP or a RO plant.
Yes.
Right?
I think people confuse between the term recycling, refiltering, and re-refining. Recycling and refiltering is very, very crude, right? You can do it actually in your office, I mean in your premises as well. But what actually is required for making finished lubricant is re-refined base oil, which we call it as RRBO, which actually needs a huge investment in terms of putting up a re-refinery. Right, there are fractional distillation processes, vacuum distillation processes, hydro treating, hydro cracking. You need to put up a big unit, right? So while you can recycle for sure, but I'm not sure if it is going to be falling. I mean, you'll obviously get a CPCB approval now to do it and get onto the portal, the new EPR portal. But yes, recycling, refiltering possible, but re-refining.
But that is not the environmentally sound.
Yeah, that is not
simple recycling. It should be re-refined, and for that you need a proper facility, a proper factory setup for that.
Yes. Somebody asked about the per liter rate. I think you answered that, right? In terms of per liter rate for used oil.
So price tracing is not there as of now. It is open to market rate.
Yes.
Of course, we have seen that the unscrupulous players
Yes,
might
very much of
pay
a
for higher.
spot buying and selling market. It's about how much you can negotiate. Who has a better negotiating power, I guess, at this
But
moment,
more
right?
than rate, I think it is important for you to see who you are selling it to,
Absolutely,
right? And
absolutely.
sending it to the refiner.
Correct, correct. Uh, Somebody asked about disposing hybrid batteries. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question here, but
So
I think
I'm sure with the battery waste management, with the battery EPR, they'll also be having a list of
yes,
registered
they
players
do
on
have.
the EPR batteries portal.
Yes,
So do check out that portal. I'm sure you'll find the right person to whom you
yes,
can sell
yes.
the used battery.
Somebody asked about best practices for oil scrap storage. Yes, we have mentioned that. Yes, I think most questions we've covered here. We've covered almost all questions which are there on the chat.
We are
Yes,
getting various queries or who are the authorized players in different states. Again, I'll urge you to go either to the CPCB, that is Central Pollution Control Board website, or the individual state pollution control board website, like Andhra Pradesh State Pollution Control website, Kerala State Pollution Board website, right? So all the states, rather, I'm not naming it. I'm seeing Jharkhand, Andhra Pradesh, various state names. So all the state pollution control board websites have their own website, so you can always visit their website. And in the hazardous waste management section, you'll find the list of authorized players for use. Mhm.
yes, yes. So any more questions? I mean, Richa, are there any more questions that we need to answer, or yeah, it's 12:01, on spot.
Yeah.
I think you all have covered quite a lot, and all of us would have understood the importance of following the correct practice and what is good for the environment, what is good for us, what is good for future. Of course, the question in a lot of people's mind would be that will we get the same rate that we would get what we are getting from the unorganized sector compared to the official process that will come in. So that is our, I guess, a question maybe people are not putting up very transparently on the Q&A box. Yes, but like you said, that price discovery is something that happens separately, and we will have to contact the authorized resellers and then figure how that happens. Segregation of each type of oil, segregation of all the material that come out, which now we will not categorize as scrap. It is a national resource, like you said. So I think the ensuring the correct method of disposal of it and following the strict norms that will be coming in place are things that we all certainly want. We will, I think in Indira we can circulate the lists of resellers which are available in each state from our site, so people can have it ready. So I think all of us learned a lot, and thank you very much. Thank you, Richa and Indira ma'am, also for organizing the webinars, and thank you, Kasturi and Kedar, for enlightening us today. I think it was an hour well spent, and we do look forward to keep engaging with you all and adding value to the dealers.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and to put up this very important topic of used oil to the dealers. And we also look forward to interacting more with the FADA company.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, FADA team. And yes, we are here to help you for any issues, anything related to compliance, either at an FADA level or even at an individual dealership level. So, I think happy to help in terms of, anything to do with circular economy, EPR, not just oil, but,